right, everybody. Welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I'm your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff. Apparently, it looks like there's going to be some infrastructural changes in the debate and other assorted ventures and venues. It's going to go to Washington, D.C., so we're going to explore that a little bit. And it also looks like the world has shut down, and now we know exactly why the government cannot trust us with information about what's going on in Area 51. So, Cody, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, well, I guess so. We'll kind of walk through this. Something we've been talking about over the last few days is with all the stuff going on right now with the coronavirus, and I believe the World Health Organization did move it up to a global pandemic. So big, serious stuff. We've already seen candidates, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, who, by the way, has been openly discussed their age for a while on this campaign trail. And we kind of mentioned before, it's kind of hard to shake hands and kiss babies all the time if you're worried about there's something going around. So we'd seen them been canceling rallies and events, moving towards more digital stuff. I think the easiest thing to do at first, and we're seeing it just moving towards more. I think Biden gave a response, an address, I believe, on coronavirus today, and it's just more to the media, less fans involved. But over the past 24 hours or so, a couple other things have been shaken up. Now, we're going to go back a little bit here. So there's a debate scheduled this Sunday. It was actually really, it was kind of bad news for Bernie. It was like breaking news. Bernie's not dropping out. He'll be at the debate. And it's like, wow, that sucks, right? You would hope if he's running, he's not dropping out and he'll be at the debate. Anyway, there had been some minor rule changes, but they announced today that just over concerns, mostly due to what it is here is travel concerns. They don't want everyone having to travel into Arizona and travel out. And since all these people are based in D.C. anyway, they're just going to move the thing to Washington, D.C. Now, it's interesting. They had already confirmed, I want to say, a week ago, almost a few days ago, there'd be no audience in attendance at this debate. So the next televised debate between Joe Biden,
that's going to be weird.
It is. Well,
because as a politician, you thrive off that interaction with the audience.
Oh yeah,
and you really kind of have all kinds of micro engagements of how your sound bites go, and that's weird. I think it's weirder to have a debate with no audience than a professional baseball game with no audience.
That's not even true at all, though. But
come on.
It's
just because you like baseball more than
Not.
politics.
I'll tell you what. Watch a debate with no audience, and you might not notice. Watch a sporting event with no audience, and you're like, this looks boring and stupid. Why is that guy just standing there by himself in the middle of the grass?
A visual sports
for
game,
no reason. I'm serious. You will be surprised how much. Again, not getting lost in the audience, because that's to get to one of the other things I want to talk about. So the news today, as far as what's actually happening, it has been announced they are moving it. I do think it's a little bit, they might as well have all these debates in D.C. It's where everybody at these debates is from. There'll be a few party people from Arizona that don't get to show up, but I know it's debates, I guess, aren't as big a deal, but still. Arizona Dems can't be happy to have lost that event to Washington, but here we go. They're moving it. There'll be no audience, but there's also a second point of discussion I do want to get into as well. Now, this is something that has been brought up, and it believes, here, I'll just go down a bit so you guys can read this a little better. It's posted in the Hill, but it says Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez said in a new interview that he is not contemplating moving the party's convention online due to growing coronavirus concerns. Perez told Axios the July convention in Milwaukee is set to continue as planned. Quote, "We are working with our state and local partners, and I'm confident that we can work out a plan that will enable us to have our convention," he said in the interview, which is set to air in full on Sunday. So,
don't you love that term? He is not contemplating.
Yeah. Well, I want to read you one quote that's really funny first, and then we'll get into some.
I am
stuff.
Not contemplating divorce.
Come down a little bit. This is a great line from Perez right here. He said, he'd also note that they'd have to change the rules to move the convention online. We'd have to change the rules, and we're not contemplating rule changes. Mr. Tom Perez, who woke up one morning and said, I want to change the debate rules so Mike Bloomberg could be in the debates without consulting anyone. That guy, The same DNC, it's like, you know what? Let's just up the debate requirements from one delegate to, what is 20% of pledged delegates? It was like 50 or something. Like, just this idea that, they the DNC doesn't change rules all the time as a reason is ridiculous. Now, I would say a big reason for that is a lot of us don't know what we're going to be looking at because, as you mentioned before, there have been a lot of sporting events. Like, we're just in a period right now, it seems, of uncertainty, and a lot of stuff's getting suspended. I'm a big Dota 2 fan. The Los Angeles Dota 2 event got postponed. Just right before we started recording, Major League Baseball announced 2 weeks. So we're seeing a lot of this stuff happen, but I wonder if that's now. in July, maybe they're hoping things will be a little bit different in July and they'll be able to have it. But it is interesting to bring up the idea of moving to a remote convention. I mean, there has already been with rallies, and we're seeing with the debates, it's already disrupting the election cycle. So I guess, sorry, I lied. There's one last thing I want to touch on, and that is just the idea. And by the way, America's not the only country going through this issue with coronavirus. And the president of France, who I believe has had his people protesting against him for almost a year straight.
Yeah, I was about to say.
For context. Either way, though, he went on to mention that while they will be closing all their schools, daycares, and universities, their municipal election scheduled for the Sunday will go on as planned to ensure the continuity of our democratic life and our institutions. Worth mentioning, I believe the elections we had earlier this week on Tuesday, I do not think there was any major disruption to how those went out. I don't think there's any major impactment on turnout. However, I have heard that they're looking I'll see if I can pull it up in a second here. They're looking Florida, when Florida votes, for example. I want to say next Tuesday, perhaps moving polling locations out of like senior living facilities and maybe just trying to have polling locations more strategically placed. So it seems we're already seeing now with our elections coming up, just considerations being in place. But
yeah,
it really is. It's one of the things. It's weird when you don't think about an issue of like an illness going around like this that could be spread person to person. When there is one, you think of all the times where it's like, wow, like people just get on planes and like fly to other countries and then like fly back.
Yeah.
Like it's like, yeah, I mean, most of the time there's nothing really to worry about. But in times like this, all of a sudden we see where it's like, yeah, maybe candidates, maybe like Elizabeth Warren wouldn't be doing her 9-hour selfie lines, which is really just someone takes a. Politicians have to stop calling it a selfie when they take a picture with someone.
Yeah, it's true.
It refers to the act of taking the photo yourself. That's where the self and selfie comes from. When you just pose next to somebody and your photographer takes a picture, it's not really a selfie anymore. It's more just a picture. But anyway, just things like that have been kind of commonplace in how we do a campaign. I mean, I said it before, shaking hands and kissing babies is like, what is the rule? The cliche for how you campaign. That's the kind of stuff we might be seeing moving away from, and it will be interesting. So now saying the DNC announced they're moving the debate location after originally announcing there'd be no audience. I believe they've held firm to there being no audience as well. I don't think they're just saying, LOL, Arizona, sorry. Now there's an audience because we're back in our home turf in D.C.
Yeah, totally.
But very interesting stuff to see, especially all the shenanigans around this debate anyways, where Biden gets to sit down. And one thing is, I don't know how they've addressed this entirely. I guess they'll just go back to using moderators. One thing that's almost ironic, when they first were announcing the rules for this debate, one of the main wrinkles in this debate was that they wouldn't be fielding questions from the moderators. They'd be fielding questions from the audience. Well, now there will be no audience, and it's in Washington, D.C. So I'm guessing they're just going to have the moderators pick up the slack. I'll look and see if I can do some more digging and find it. This was announced, I think, like an hour ago, so I'm still trying to find a little more additional info. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how candidates being able to do less rallies, less public appearances, and we're going to see. I wouldn't be surprised, maybe, my last little thing I'll say here on this for the 5th time, but I'm serious this time. I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of consolidation towards perhaps D.C. for a lot of events like this.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll still have the convention in Milwaukee for the Democrats, but I would not be surprised for them to just say, look, instead of having us travel all across the country, why don't we just move things closer and closer to D.C.?
And you know something I can't help thinking in this whole entire process, Cody, is there's not only the institutional and the psychological advantage of what Andrew Yang had proposed about decentralizing Washington, D.C., there's a medical advantage. When you decentralize something, heaven forbid if all of a sudden a bunch of government officials were to be infected and all of a sudden government couldn't meet together, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Then, I mean, a pandemic in Washington, D.C., I shouldn't say pandemic, an epidemic in Washington, D.C. could have much deeper ripples than an epidemic in Houston, Texas.
Well, I mean, like, unfortunately,
okay,
just with the amount of travel into D.C., because to your point, though, I want to highlight this. Additionally, they mentioned in the article, Jorge Ramos from Univision, your boy, he was going to be one of the moderators, but since he was potentially exposed to the virus, even though he's not exhibiting any symptoms, he has stepped down from his role as one of the moderators to be replaced by, I believe it is a Lila Calderon. So, like, we're already seeing, like, to your point, and just, like you said, like, they're already kind of like, hey, not only are we moving it to D.C., and I'm sure he made the decision himself, but people are saying seeing that. They're shrinking away because, like, to your point, you don't want
Yeah.
people, like, that would be a really bad place for people to start getting sick, would be where the Democratic debate is. You know what I mean? That'd be really bad.
And
So we're
here's the
seeing it happen.
here's the data I'm really interested in seeing. With all of this hullabaloo over coronavirus, and the people forget that the regular flu is still out there. You know what I'm saying? And I'm curious to see what the data is. You know, we usually have in low years 35 to 40,000 people that perish from standard flu. In bad years, 70,000. Okay. In horrible Spanish flu years, you know, percentages of our population in the South especially. Okay. But now with all of this caution and this overabundance of caution that's happening with the coronavirus, it almost makes you wonder how curbed standard influenza will be. I'm really curious to see a year or two from now.
Oh, like the ripples? Yeah, if we do get...
when we look back on what all of these shutdowns and these postponements and everything did to stop coronavirus, what it actually did to stop the standard flu. Because, for example, when you go to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, they allow no children visitors under the age of 13 between the months of November and May. During flu season, they just say, no, if you're under the age of 13, you cannot come in to visit your brother and your sister. And it was very emotionally difficult when we were with my daughter in the hospital because my son couldn't come and visit, and he was kind of confused. He didn't really understand why. But it's because children of that age have no way of communicating whether or not they're carriers of an illness. And you've got an entire floor of immunodepressed children that are receiving chemotherapy, right? So small institutions that have specific quarantines like that already in place have been able to scientifically show with measurable quantifiers a reduction in illness spread, right? I'm wondering what kind of general ideas will be taken out of the worldwide phenomenon of coronavirus, because it wasn't shortly after the Black Plague that doctors started speculating there's these things called cells and there's these things called germs. And the first scientists, that suggested it were heralded as psychotic. In fact, the first man that discovered germs.
Well, what's different with coronavirus, though, is before this spread had happened, doctors have been, they're aware of this thing and what it is. It's not like, oh, we've never seen this before. It's, we'd been afraid something like this would happen. So I think that kind of stuff.
Well, basically, all I'm trying to say here is basically because of the Black Plague, in just like Fanta was made for the military and frozen ice cream was made for the astronauts, the fear generated of the Black Plague led to scientific inquiry that basically led to the commonality of washing our hands. You know what I'm saying? Washing our hands before meals and washing our hands in order to avoid disease. I'm wondering if there's going to be any common rules of thumb now as societies with large groups that will be developed from the coronavirus. Like, we're literally living history here. And I'm trying to avoid the hype and just say, look,
hold on.
Will this birth standard practices that are not normal now that will be normal later?
I would say, as of we sit right now, probably not. Because I do want to mention, while we are actually, obviously most, but not all of you watching this are Americans. A lot, obviously, but we have a lot of friends outside of America. But people just kind of in the Western English-speaking world, it's been a little bit oh no, coronavirus came. It's all this, all this stuff going on. For me, I'm a big sports fan. A lot of sports stuff being canceled. It's important to remember, China already has basically stemmed and started to reduce their issues going on with the spread, which is where it was based out of. So it isn't
it's the FAR principle.
But the idea is that it's already, this is the kind of thing that a country has dealt with at a more advanced scale than we have. And they've been okay. I mean, I heard recently, I'm trying to pull this article up, actually. I really want to show you guys this, because this is the one thing that really, because there's a lot of stuff out there going around about, sorry, one second. There we go. I want to show you guys this. Going on about how bad it is, what's going on in Italy, for example, and stuff. It's worth noting, this is what people were saying about China a month ago. And China has gotten themselves to the point where they haven't only stemmed the they haven't only worked to stem the kind of release and spread of the virus, and they haven't kind of got control of it. It's gotten to the point now where they're sending experts, ventilators, and masks to Italy. I mean, China's at the point now where they're giving up voluntarily medical supplies to other countries because they've said, hey, we've dealt with this. We know you need this stuff. We're at a point now where we stockpiled all this because it wasn't that long ago everyone was sending supplies to China, by the way. But they've said we have the stuff and they're redistributing it. I just thought it's interesting to point out that it isn't that like, while there is a lot of places are moving on and further, we're seeing in America, especially just in general, a lot of countries in Europe are starting to cancel sporting events. Well, that stuff's just starting to happen now. It's happened in China and other parts of Eastern Europe, mainly in China where it was centered. And they got to a point where they had most people treated. I think they've decommissioned, I don't want to say exact number, but several of the hospitals they built to deal with this, they decommissioned. So worth pointing, it does seem to be a temporary thing the country will probably get our hand around. But for the next few months, it happens to be an election year. And it's really, really weird how it's infecting things or impacting things.
Yeah. So all I know is I got my AR and my respirator.
I am ready.
I just want to start. It was actually kind of funny. I walked out earlier, and it looks like that the junior high nearby has decided to do a minimum day or suspend schooling because all of a sudden tons of kids were in my front yard a lot earlier than they usually are. Usually it's around 3 p.m. Around 10 or 11 there I see thousands of kids walking home, so I assume there was some kind of suspension that went on, and it was hilarious because I walked out with my respirator and they're all looking at me kind of funny like, hey, what's going on here? So I just view this as the new status symbol, Cody. Like, this is the new Escalade. This is so hard to get that now, instead of walking around with the bling or the grill or some kind of nice Armani
Hey, sounds
suit,
good, dude. I should probably rob you then.
I just walk around and they see this and they're like, oh, he's got the purple HEPA filter. Oh, that guy's cool, man. He's got the real thing, Does that sound right to you?
Like I said, it sounds like I should probably follow you home and rob you. That's what I would think. But hey, what do I know, huh?
That's why I got my AR, man. So
yeah. I'm glad I know that because you've announced it publicly as well. I'm glad I know the things you have and where you have them. Glad to know that now.
In fact, it's actually in the closet in the backyard guest house, and the code number is... No, I'm just kidding. So, all right, anyway, let us know what you guys think. Make sure you follow us on PSP Radio 1. If you haven't had a chance to join the channel, join the channel. It's an inexpensive way to make sure that we are corporate sponsor free and you get all of our pure, unadulterated, independent thought. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, both under Problem Solver Politics. And other than that, we just want to make sure you smash that like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Keep the conversation going in the comments below. This is Problem Solver Politics. We'll see you guys in the next video.